Okay, so greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm just about to finish editing this video. This will be a three introduction video on one of the three bangers. Um, so I had a bad night last night. Today's Saturday, April 12th. So Friday night, we do this an individual cleaning sitting every Friday night at 9 p.m., which went really well. So it was a good meditation, and so I felt good going to bed. But when I got in bed, I was just restless. I was itchy. It was a full moon. I noticed a full moon. My wife and I went walking last night. I pointed out the full moon. And, and I don't know if it had anything to do with that. Friday nights, full moons are supposed to be really bad for criminal activity, like for cops and things. But either way, whatever it was, I was itchy. My shirt kept on getting, I wear sort of baggy clothing. I like to have freedom of movement, and I like good airflow because I usually run hot. And it's usually fairly comfortable, but somehow my shirt was like bunching up and I just couldn't get comfortable. Like everything was bothering me. I was irritable. I go to sleep for 10, 15 minutes, and then I'd wake back up. My wife was having trouble sleeping initially because she took a long nap. We were watching TV together before bed. She was having trouble sleeping initially, but then she fell asleep. And every time I woke up, she was asleep, so I thought that she was having a good night. But she told me she was restless till about 4 a.m. She's almost just going to get up and do some work or whatever because, you know, she wasn't sleeping. But finally, she went back and slept well from 4 to whatever time she woke up. But we both had similar issues. I don't remember the last time I had a night like that where I just felt, like I was very aware of like things touching me, whether it was the covers or whatever it was. Like my body was hypersensitive. I was really irritable, and just whatever. And so I don't know if other people are experiencing this, because I thought I'd just put that out there, because if people had, so it'd be probably, this video's going up Sunday morning, so this would be 2 nights ago. If you guys remember what you had, like some, in terms of a bad night, then you could leave a comment about it. See if this was something that was, there's something that a lot of people are experiencing for whatever reason. That would be interesting. Like I had no idea my wife was going through the same thing until we talked about it today. Anyways, here's the first introduction. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I have a couple of voiceovers that's going to be in my journey series that they're important to what I was covering yesterday with Mr. Wonderful and the collapse of this civilization, the economy, and some of the other things. I'm going to get into new thing about COVID, a new sort of breaking story about COVID, and the hiding of reports and things like this, and then stuff to do with, I'm going to get into the Trump cabinet meeting and some of these other things. But what we're talking about here is the possibility of the collapse of civilization, which is on the table. Like, we know it because it's in our movies. We know it's because it's in our our culture, our politics. I mean, it's just everywhere. TV shows that the Apocalaughs is possible. It's always possible, but it's something where, it's not some crazy conspiracy theory or not some doomsday, some doomsday cult person. It's actually, it feels like it's going to happen soon, right? And there could be some acknowledgement from the powers that be, which I'll get into. That'll be sort of the theme of this video. But let me play these two voiceovers as an introduction, then we'll get into these other things. Okay, so this audio is going in the 188th edition of the Journey series, but also it is going to be at the end of my next video. And so for the Journey series, I'm going to put my last video I made, which is entitled Potty Mouth Trump, Mr. Wonderful, and Bill O'Reilly Admit to What I've Been Saying for Years. And what that is, Trump said it was unsustainable, and Mr. Wonderful and Bill O'Reilly admitted, which Trump is also admitting, that the system is absolutely fucked, right? They were talking about China, right? All three of them, and specifically Bill O'Reilly, and more so Mr. Wonderful. Mr. Wonderful said China, they cheat, they don't follow any of the rules or protocols, they steal, and they, they're horrible, the government and the corporations and the policies. And so there's a lot of evil in the world, but China makes it illegal. It's not just, we don't believe in God, but if anybody believes in God, they are a criminal. They criminalize your belief, what you believe internally, or at least if you express it externally, that you believe in God. So it's not anti-religion, because anti-religion religion isn't really about God, but it's an anti-God country. The capitalist system in America are also anti-God. They just do it in a different way. They commercialize God through their religion and through the bullshit commercialization of stuff, right? America does that. Europe, to a lesser extent, Europe is more openly against God, but you can believe it if you want, but it's all BS. There's that time with COVID happened when they closed down the churches, and you know how I feel about religion and the hypocrisy of Christianity. But when they did that, they were saying that science rules over God now, because they wouldn't have done that when I grew up as a kid. They wouldn't have said, scientists are saying you can't go to church. Scientists saying it's unsafe to go to church, right? It's bogus science. That's when the religion of science took over, because science, it isn't pure science. It isn't empirical, research. It isn't some, wonderful, the best science that they could give you. It's bullshit, gimmicky science that's driven by profit and things like this. And so it's all corruption. But in America, they say, well, you can believe in God, but we're going to commercialize that. And why don't you enjoy these nice, luxurious items instead, right? Why don't you focus on your material pleasures, your sensory stimulation? So it pulls people away from the divinity within them. It pulls them away from true spirituality, true relationship with God, but they do it in a more insidious way. Where China is just like, fuck you, you guys even mention God, you're going to jail, right? So, it's a little bit more blatant. And every country around the world has a relationship with these two non-believers, basic atheistic countries. America's an atheistic country because it's focused on material pleasure, and Chinese countries just flat out against God in every possible way. But everybody has a relationship with China financially and economically. We all receives goods from them and other things. So we're all complicit, right? This is the system we're dependent on. Basically, one country that's, I don't even call it atheistic because it's like hates God, right? China hates God. In America, whatever, it's created its own God of, money is God and these things. And then the rest of the countries that have their own level of this stuff, but everyone around the world is affected. And so that's why the system has to go. It's against God. It's an egotistical system. You got your ego and your soul, and if you embrace your ego, you're going against your soul. Your ego has to accept your soul and your soul's purpose and the divine teachings, right? The reason I'm including the video in my journey series is that the videos I make are very topical. They're not timeless because they're about what's going on. I've been covering a lot more politics lately because of this is the end of the world stuff. Like we're heading towards the Apocalaughs. And the celebrity culture, although it played its role in bringing us to this point, it's been negated. Like the symbolism in movies is no longer all that important. The indoctrination you got from movies is no longer that important because real shit is playing out in a global type of situation. We're heading towards World War III and the end of the world as we know it, right? And which is a good thing because it's a demonic system, but it's a bad thing because we're screwed in terms of our personal ability to survive such a thing, right? We all have to, we're all going to have to give up things and adapt to what's going on in the world. But because these videos, some of them have real great information in them, some of my videos that I think are more important than others, and yet they have their one day of life, the day I upload, the day I make them public, and then, maybe some people watch them the next week or so. It gets the majority of its views in the first day. And it just dies a slow death. Some of my older videos weren't about current events so much. They were about, certainly, it was I was covering Prince's death. Someone might be able to watch that video in 6 months, but it's not going to have as much interest behind it, whatever it is. But the Journey series stuff is timeless because it's about the journey of the soul, and people can pick that up whenever. They can start watching those videos whenever, in the beginning of, watch from beginning to where I am now, wherever it is. And so some of the things will be kept in a more sort of timeless state. They don't get as many views, but they're always current. The Journey series is always current. And so I'm going to add this video because I think it's really important, because these people who are, powerful people are finally admitting what I've been saying. And it isn't my, this is how I've always felt about the system. I knew the system was fucked, even as a kid. And of course, the Sajmark teachings are about that. But now it's much easier to see that it's fucked. Like, they're admitting to it that it's fucked. I mean, in every possible way. That we're going in the wrong direction on every level of our system. And they're not, most people don't want to admit that because, they don't want to feel like they're bad people. Like, people don't want to feel like when they buy something from China, they're a part of the slave labor. You're supporting people who are exploiting, who are human trafficking, basically, in these horrible they're the worse than, slavery type jobs. I mean, some of the ways that these, they have suicide nets outside their fucking buildings because people would rather kill themselves than work another minute. Like, that's how bad it is. And then the people who do that and make that happen, including Apple, and then we buy phones and computers from them. So we're supporting these people who abuse these other people in China, like we all are. And, you can reconcile that whatever way you want. But that's what we're doing. And so we're all supporting evil in one way or another. And as long as we're supporting the system, we're supporting evil. And, damage to the environment, damage to other people. And you can say, well, let's get rid of this problem or that problem. But it's how the system works. The whole system, it's predicated on wealth and, wealth disparity and people having money power and these things and political power, celebrity power, religious power, and all that power is used to abuse other people. It's used to give you a better life and more privileges and more, your voice counts more than the majority of the other people. And so as long as there's going to be that kind of system that usurps the position of God, takes people away from the divinity within them, takes them away from what makes them natural human beings, we're supporting a demonic system. And when it goes down, it's for the best. But, it's going to be tough. Like, that's just the reality of our situation. We're dependent on something. We're like all drug addicts and the drug dealers, this evil global system. And when the system goes, it's for the best, but then we're all, addicted to the system and we don't know another way and don't have a backup plan. And so before I go to the video, I want to say one more thing. In the Sajmark system, it's called the natural path. Sajmark literally translates to the natural path. And it helps somebody connect with the divinity within them and go on a spiritual yatra, but it would otherwise take millions of years to go through these spiritual points by self-effort. And because of the cleaning and transmission, people are given a boost. But they don't want the boost. Like, people don't want to be at that spiritual level where you give up your ability to do the wrong thing. Because human beings have the ability to choose against God, to choose against God's will. We all have that ability. Like, there's one right choice, and that's whatever our soul, whatever the divinity within us wants us to do. And it's not just the right choice, but it's the way you go about choosing. It's the way you go about making that decision where you submit to the divinity within you, and oftentimes doing something that you don't want to do as an ego. Your ego wants to do one of many other wrong choices, but the divinity within you says, no, this is the right one. And you go, okay, I accept that. And to accept that completely, where you no longer even have the option to choose the wrong thing. You're giving up your ability to choose to do wrong. And people don't want to do that. That's why people don't want to change. They don't want to admit that they have problems. They don't want to activate any kind of connection with God, praying or meditating, because they don't want to know or be told what they're doing is wrong. And when you tell them they're doing the wrong thing, they'll just blow you off and ignore you. I worked as a counselor for a number of years. And I worked in, these treatment centers with, young sex offenders. And I worked with teenage sex offenders after I got my master's degree in counseling. And I did some counseling. And, I was working on changing myself. I realized I had to change and still do. Like, it's a constant process, right? Until you make that final leap where you no longer give yourself permission to choose to do the wrong thing. saying, fuck you, God, I'm going to do this. I know you want me to do this, but I'm going to do this. And most people don't even acknowledge God in their decision making at all, right? But up until that point, when you give over control to your soul, your ego gives over control to your soul, and you no longer have the option to make the wrong decision. You still have to change. But once you reach that point, then there's nothing to change because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You never make the wrong choice because you're always allowing your soul and God to guide you and show you what you should choose, and you always choose the right thing. But till you reach that stage, Jesus didn't reach that stage. Buddha didn't reach that stage. I mean, that's, this is something that's very rare that you reach that level of spiritual development. You might get up to that higher level, but as long as your ego is still active and your ego is still fighting with your soul, you didn't make it, right? You didn't make it to that stage. But anyways, while I was doing counseling, while I was in my master's degree program, they had a counseling service like the last semester when I was just about ready to graduate and do my internship. And they would bring clients in who would have basically free counseling. And so there was a young couple, it was a good-looking couple. They were in their 20s. I was probably 33, 34. So they were younger than me. And they were coming in for marriage counseling. And the husband took control right away. And his wife was the one who wanted to go to counseling. And he was like, the problems aren't so bad. Like he was trying to, he's saying all these things to me. The problems aren't so bad. And, I don't know how much we even really need counseling. And, we got to just tweak it a little bit. And I'm looking at his wife going, she doesn't feel that way at all, right? And the guy's trying to convince me, and I'm like, they get like 4 free sessions or whatever it was, 6 sessions, and they're never going to see me again. Like, who gives a shit what I think, right? He's trying to convince me that their marriage is great, right? And I don't give a shit about their marriage, right? I mean, it's, that's why they're there. But somebody has a problem, and it's obviously not him. So I ask his wife, whatever, she doesn't really, she's kind of saying, well, it's a little bit worse than he says. So I come up with this idea. I go, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it? How good is your marriage? Like, so 10 being the highest. And he goes, it's an 8. And she goes, it's a 2. And he goes, it's a fucking 2. And he just like loses his shit, right? Like he's not yelling at her, but he's like shocked that she's at a 2. And I knew she was at a 2. Everybody probably knows that she's at a 2. Like I knew it was going to be low. I thought maybe 3, whatever. I thought he'd be around an 8 because of what he was talking to, or even a 9. But, she's miserable. And, that's all he needed to hear. I don't know what else happened in their therapy, but he needed to know his wife's at a fucking 2. Like she's miserable because he keeps on, mansplaining to her and rearranging reality and denying what he should obviously be seeing. Because I knew them for 10 minutes and I knew she was at a fucking 2, right? And I'm sure anybody who talked to him about it or talked to her would know that she's probably pretty close to pulling the plug. They didn't have kids yet. And so, their marriage was pretty much on the rocks, and they probably didn't make it. But if they did, it would be him understanding that she's miserable and why, and then dealing with why she's so miserable. And if it has anything to do with him, which at least certainly does, then he would have to, change dramatically, unless she's just depressed or whatever she might be. Like, I don't know. But that's for them to work out, and no counselor is going to, you could unpack that with them. But the reality is they have to be willing to accept that and willing to change, either one of them or both of them, to make the marriage work, right? So in the Sajmarg system, there was the 3 masters of the system, and the 4th one shit the bed. He went all culty, whatever, dodgy. I've talked about him. But there was other people that rose to a higher level. There was this woman, Sister Kastori. In the Sajmarg, for someone to be the master of the system, they have to be a man because they have to be able to do destructive work. And the way that if you incarnate as a woman, your heart is constructed as a way, as the creative force and the nurturing force, the creation of a baby and the nurturing of the baby. It's harder for women to do destructive work. And when they do destructive work, they go all Kali, the demon god Kali. Or there's some other female one in, India, but whatever it is, they just turn into demons. Like if women have to do destructive work, that's why it's, bad for women to engage in war and some of these other things. Because it's not in their nature to do this. They're supposed to be nurturers and creators, right? Mothers and then mothers and mothers. Like mother is giving birth and then mothers as nurturing that life. But this woman was super talented spiritually, and Babaji, just thought the world of her. And he said the only problem is that she was born a man, or she would make the perfect master. And so when he had his disciple, Charji, the third master of the system, he would do work like, higher developed work on Charji, and then Sister Kasturi would ask to give Charji a sitting so she could read what Babaji had done in terms of, the spiritual work that she was doing on him. Like, she was really hypersensitive, and she was really good at being a preceptor. And she was kind of nurturing to Charji, although they had some, competitive things, like they were both trying to pack Babaji's suitcase, and like she packed it and Charji unpacked it and repacked it his way, and then she came back and repacked, like that kind of stuff. Like, even for, higher developed souls, there were some like petty things, little, jealousies or whatever it might be, competition. But she, was more or less like sort of a big sister to Charji. She was a little bit older than him. And when he became master, she was supportive at first. All these people, they tried to murder him, and they tried to take away his title. Babaji's kids turned on him. There's lawsuits and attempted life. Somebody poisoned him. Another guy showed up at the ashram with a gun to shoot him. Like, there was real shit that went down, real like corrupt, like Indian bullshit that went down. But at some point, Sister Kasturi left. And, there was a number of people that were put up into the higher levels of spiritual, regions, and they were good spiritual people. But they didn't sustain their commitment to the system. When Babaji passed away or before it, they had some kind of spiritual fall. There's these issues. And these were higher developed souls. They had reached much higher levels than, the famous spiritual beings of, Buddha and Jesus and Krishna and some of these other ones, because of the nature of the Sajmark system that, within one life, you could get all this spiritual attainment that takes like millions of years of soul journey to accomplish. But because of that, they call it the natural path, but it's not really all that natural. I mean, it is natural in the way that it goes about it, but it expedites the process. And people can't even, there were a lot of spiritual beings that came down, and they were only on the first rung. I mean, Jesus is regarded as the Son of God, but he was only on the first rung of his spiritual development. If you understand what he was doing, the miracles and things that he was able to do and some of these other things come at the first point of your spiritual evolution, the first step on the ladder. And even that's too much for people. And so, you have these higher developed souls that come in and they reach some higher level, and people look at them as gods because of how much higher they are than a normal person, but they're really not even that far down the path. And yet they end up falling spiritually. They succumb to power, temptation, or, just the overwhelming, soul-crushing, the need that these people, the masses, come to you with when you start becoming a spiritual person, that these people just descend on you because they're so needy and so desperate, like vampirish and zombie-ish, and sucking your energy out of you as you try to help them, but like it's just overwhelming. Every spiritual person experiences being overwhelmed by their followers' need, their desperate, needy, aspect of their followers. And, if the person starts forgetting about God, which often happens, they start feeling themselves because they've reached a certain level and people see them in a different light. And then they get just, they're not getting the sustenance they need from the divinity above them. And they're being sucked, their energy sucked out of them from their followers. And, it's usually a painful end to their life that happens, of depression and just a loss of hope and faith in these things. And so that's how humanity has dealt with the relationship with divine beings and divine beings, their own spiritual evolution. And unfortunately, that's just, a problem where people either refuse to evolve at all, or if they do evolve, they end up falling. And there just isn't some, people just don't want to give up their ability to choose to do the wrong thing. And so China and America are extreme versions of this. I mean, it's not particularly China, but America in a different way. Big egos and, egotistical pursuit and a full-out assault on the divinity within not just the people themselves, but the government forcing you, not to believe in certain things, right? And not to utter certain words and all the rest of it. So, but if there is a God, which I believe there is, then there's a plan and there's divine contingencies, and going against God's will is a problem. Like, we've been given freedom of choice, But it isn't really freedom of choice at all, because whenever you make a wrong decision, there's consequences that come immediately. And, those consequences are, I mean, there's the outcome, whatever what people would call karma, or what I call some skaras, two different things. But like there's a heaviness that you start developing, where you lose your ability to feel things. You lose your ability, eventually you become dumber and less sensitive, and you're just oblivious to the world around you. You're in pain, but it's a weird kind of pain. You can't connect to the divinity within you, like what's happening inside of you. And then you just make one mistake after another. And then there are the consequences in the material world. Loss of job, loss of relationships, things, inability to love other people, inability to love at all, inability to, physical issues, cancer and heart disease, and, all the things that go with it, just the struggles that go with it, that are indicating you made the wrong choice and you need to go back and, live a better life and become a better person. But people ignore the warnings because they don't want to give up their ability to choose to do the wrong thing. And so that's where we are as a species. And the consequences are just right there waiting for us. Okay, so for people watching this in the Journey series, I'm going to put the video up that I was talking about here. And so here it is. Okay, so it's one thing I want to add to my earlier voiceover that's going to go both in my next video and in the Journey series. That people have this idea of enlightenment. When people go to gurus and priests and teachers or holy people, spiritual people, even to some extent counselors, they're going because they want answers, right? There's a small percentage that has just a craving to connect to God, like an internal craving, something that they can't really explain. They have a spiritual predisposition, and everybody has that a little bit. And oftentimes when people go to seek something, a higher level person or consciousness, they are in crisis. They're physically in crisis. They've just had a relationship end. They're in a transitional period, right? They're questioning their existence. They, whatever it is, they're depressed. And so there's all of those reasons. But for the most part, what they want is answers. They go looking for God to get some answers on what to do and, what to believe. Oftentimes they're questioning their own beliefs and they're looking to form new beliefs, right? And, whatever that's going on there, whatever lures them into, and I want to say lures like as a deception, it's like the soul is allowing the ego to be deceived so the soul can get what it needs, right? So the soul and your destiny, you have a destiny to find a spiritual path. And, there are divine beings that are, like you have a spiritual support team. There's, what people consider angels. There's these divine beings that are here moving the narrative forward. And etheric beings can intercommune with you and give you ideas, share thoughts with you, give you, manage things in a way that cause you to follow a certain action, right? To lead you down a path that you'll choose, but will influence the factors that make up that choice, right? And, it's probably, most people would freak out when they think about that, but sometimes your thoughts aren't even your own. Like you get thoughts that could be coming from a dark entity, like what people consider demons or higher developed souls. It's your mind could be hacked if it's a hostile and can be gently influenced to coax you in the right direction if it's a divine being, a higher developed being, right? But I can speak, from doing the meditation for years, and, people come here because I'm connected to something, right? I've been meditating, and, the divine hierarchy, as we call it in our spiritual movement, the masters of the system, and information comes to me and through me. And people want that information, they value that information, some of my viewers, and they recognize that this is, that there's something there, and the energy that's with it. Like this energy comes with the ideas and, when I'm talking, it comes through the videos, right? But I can speak with, everything that I know about this. There are no answers. There's no enlightenment. There's no things that are going to be said that are going to change your life. There's no quote you're going to have, some bumper sticker bullshit thing that you can put up on your wall. There's something that, some, mantra, some fucking thing that you can say that's going to make a difference, right? And your beliefs don't mean shit either. Like whatever your beliefs are. When you go to God, and the reason people don't go to God, or they go to God and they don't stick, is that God is boring, right? Like in terms of material life and sensory stimulation, doing the wrong thing, partying, indulging, going to nice places, indulging your eyes and your ears and your touch, your sense of touch and smell and taste and all these things, and experimenting with, various mind altering drugs. Like that's all exciting. That all has pop and big experiences. But spiritual people, true spiritual people, are boring. They live boring lives. When you think about yourself in your most spiritual states, like when you're a baby, you're very spiritual because you just came in from the etheric world. Wherever your soul was before, you're fresh and you're new. And babies are boring, right? They can't talk, they can't speak, they can't control their bodily functions, they can't feed themselves. All this they can do is drink some sort of breast milk or knockoff of breast milk, which is not nearly as good. Whatever that stuff they buy in cans or whatever it is, or those powdery stuff. And then you can start eating like fucking carrots with no salt in them, with like a little bit of apple or some shit, or like baby food. I mean, if you ever tasted that shit, it's horrible. Then they start adding a little bit of salt to it as you get older, and so you basically have, you can't do anything. You can't play checkers or chess with a baby, right? You can't have a catch, can't have a conversation, right? They're cute and they're very easy to love because of they have to be, but they're basically worthless, right? They don't have anything, but that's when they're in an innocent spiritual state. And then when people get old, if they've lived a good life, the same thing happens. They become spiritual, but their bodies are no longer functioning. They've lost interest in their lives and things. They have very few things they care about. They can't eat anything anymore. Same kind of stuff, simple food. Can't do anything, exercise, activities. Where I used to run and play sports, I now walk and exercise on a little freaking stupid stair thing. It's just it's driving at night becomes more difficult. Your eyes, your senses, you're very overstimulated by things, loud noises and stuff, and you're just become more boring, or you live more simple lives because God is boring, right? God is simple. God isn't exciting. God isn't big experiences. You can have big divine experiences. That's not God. That's divine experiences, spiritual experiences. And the closer you get to God and the more, farther you go, the more subtle it is. And when you get to the goal, it's very subtle. And, where if you think about TV shows and movies, a lot of the action, a lot of the excitement is due to wrong behavior and bad choices. Like you watch a lot, especially these dramas, a lot of the drama is caused by misunderstandings and bad choices, people acting impulsively. People watch things when people make mistakes and when someone has some crisis, like when Britney Spears broke down or Justin Bieber or any of these people, right? That's what people are interested in. Drama, poor choices, people falling, celebrities. I mean, celebrities that live very simple lives and they're generous and they're good people, they don't want to hear about that shit, right? That have stable marriages and there's no affairs and there's no drama. Like people are not interested in that kind of thing. I mean, for me to talk about God here, I have to do it with, this idea of talking about bullshit things that are just, have no value at all, right? Like most of the shit I talk about here, when I used to cover celebrity culture and now covering politics and the collapse of the system. I mean, the Apocalaughs is exciting, but rebuilding the system after it's destroyed isn't. And building it in accordance to divine principles. Like, no one wants to see a TV show where you have a nice marriage and everybody's, nice family and everybody just lives without any drama and any bullshit like that. That show or that movie would fail economically because people don't want to see that shit. People don't want to see subtle, and God is subtle. People don't want to see simple, and God is simple. People don't want to watch boring, and God is boring, right? If everyone was doing what they were supposed to do, all the drama and all the bullshit would disappear, and people love it. Remember from the Matrix movie where the Smith character is talking to Morpheus, and he said the first time they built the Matrix, these human beings are in pods, and because they scorched the sky, so they blacked out the sky, so the AI technology that they were at war with couldn't generate electricity from the sun anymore. And so they harvested the human bodies to use as batteries, and they created a matrix so the human mind would keep alive. So they lived in this illusionary matrix, right, that was keeping them alive. And he said that, Smith said to Morpheus, we designed a utopia, and it fell apart. It failed dramatically because you guys want drama. You guys want fucking like horrible shit. So we had to design something different, right? So people who live spiritual lives, if you eat food in a way that's, you eat gross foods with toxins, you take, alcohol and drugs, it diminishes your capacity to connect with the divinity within you. If you become physically gross, in fact, moderation in every capacity, you're watching, things with demonic images, graphic video games, graphic pornography, graphic, images on TV, unless you can learn to watch it in a detached fashion where you're connected to God. And then really, what interest would you have in it, right? Because it's the graphic nature that draws people to it. The horror movies and things, even the commercials, like they leave an impression. They cause grossness to happen in people. These samskaras, these impressions, right? So you have to take more subtle choices. You have to steer away from excitement, enthusiasm, and these things. Not like you can't be happy or you can't enjoy life, but you have to do it in a way where you enjoy the subtle things, right? You enjoy nature, you enjoy natural things, you enjoy, you love without drama, love without, I don't know, perversion or whatever it is. Like, how people get into weird shit, right? Where things can be simple and innocent and pure, right? And you can, be with that. And most people just can't. Like, people love gross shit. They love drama. They love what they consider exciting stuff, especially now with the age of the internet and these kids growing up needing more and more stimulation. And so they lose their sense of being able to enjoy the simple things in life. My wife and I just both love animals and interact with animals. And we had this situation where we were walking along a beach on vacation, and these dolphins were right on the shoreline. I put a video up of it. And, they were right next to the shore, and they were, fishing, surfacing right there. I mean, we could reach out and touch them. Like if we ran and jumped, we could have dived on top of them. Of course, that would be, the bullshit thing to do. But they were right there. And then it happened, and our kids were with us. And then it happened again, and our kids were like, well, we've already seen that, right? We were like, holy shit. My wife and I were like, this is like this amazing thing. It's something that you get to see a couple times in your life if you're lucky, right? And, once would be amazing, and twice would be like, oh my God, this is happening again. And they were bored with it after one time, right? But not playing video games or watching TV or whatever the fuck they like to do, right? These stimulating things. And so, it's getting grosser, and it's getting to the point where people need more and more gross shit and less boring, subtle, simple, beautiful, innocent things. And so that's the fall of humanity. I mean, humans are attracted to drama and to making bad choices and living with those choices and chaos and, all these things. Like people who break up all the time and get back together, and they feel like there's a lot of excitement, a lot of emotion, lower level emotion in their relationships. But, it's draining, and it's not a good relationship, right? Something that's more subtle and stable and these things. There's a line from Don Henley's Heart of the Matter. I think we threw off our contentment and we begged for something more. He was content, and, they were content, but that wasn't enough, right? They were content, like happily married, whatever, content in their marriage, but, wanting some other sort of, some excitement, some kind of, new thing or whatever it might be. So, when you go to God, there's no big answers. There's no any of these kind of things. Like people who do the Sajmark system, whatever reason they come in, they have to realize at some point it's just they're giving up the ability to choose to do the wrong things. And they have to live more moderate and subtle lives, not because it's forced or there's somebody saying, oh, give up this or give up that, just because they know they have to give it up. They know that it's causing them to feel less subtle and simple. It's something they have to do internally to gravitate to, connect to the divinity within them. And that, everything in your material life is, fades from view, and you can only see God at some point, right? And to do that, you have to like the boring, you have to like the subtle, you have to like the simple. Where, even things that are, somewhat, not considered bad things, but they're they're heavy, they're heavy compared to God. They're gross compared to God. Like you start resonant things the way that you resonate internally, like they're almost like offensive things, like some simple things that people are doing that are just slightly gross or slightly, whatever they are, just a little bit more energy, a little bit more excitement, a little bit more drama in them, right? It becomes like, oh my God, I don't want that. That's yucky. Like you have an aversion to it, right? You crave the simple, you crave the natural, you crave the thing that you're supposed to do. You're not thinking about doing the right thing, but fantasizing about doing the wrong thing, right? Which people do. People we're stuck in their mundane lives and they know what they're supposed to do, but deep down they have some craving to do the wrong thing, to cheat or to go use drugs or, whatever it is, to blow off work, quit job and do something else or whatever that, get rid of their neglect their duties and their things, run off and leave their families or whatever it might be, right? You have these moments where it just sucks and, you feel bummed and you just crave something, freedom. You remember when you just had to be, by yourself and take care of yourself and do fun things and party and, your younger days, and some part of you wants to relive that, and people have these midlife crises and things. Internally, they want to do these things, but they knuckle under and they don't, but that's not, embracing it, right? To where you love to do the things. You appreciate the subtle and the simple and the lack of drama and all these things. People have to reprogram and rewire themselves because we've been learned to be, we're in a situation where we're stimulated all the time. The stimulation of big news, and Trump is a gross, non-boring because of all the shit he creates, not just his personality, but he himself is bored by, the mundane things. He wants, big explosive announcements and all these things, and you can see the chaos that he causes, and people are into it. Like he's been this popular, unpopular and popular figure that people love to pay attention to because he's not, mundane. There's always something new. You never predict what's going to happen with him and his policies and the things around him and what other people will do because of him. And this just drama after drama. He's a drama queen. And I was talking about this with the Gratefulness meditation earlier in this journey series, and a couple days ago on my video, I read a comment about this. People want to deviate from the system, or they want to put their own stamp on it, or they want to, add things to it, whatever it might be, embellish it or something, jazz it up, and everyone's got their different takes on it. They, people come into the system or any system with their own desires and their own egotistical pursuits, and sometimes you need that. Otherwise, you wouldn't get started. Like I said, your soul almost tricks or allows your ego to believe something that it's not going to get out of it, like something that the ego thinks it's going to get out of it, some fame or something that make them, better in some way that pleases the ego, enhance you in some way, or, add to you in some way. But eventually you have to accept what I'm saying here, that it's nothing is exciting about any of this stuff. It's not about your ego. It's not some evil. It's not going to be gratifying to your ego, but it's just what you're supposed to be doing. And then you have to deal with that at some level. You have to deal with being able to accept the mundane and the boring and the subtle and the simple, and realize how great those things are. Like you have to deepen your appreciation of such things. And that'll get easier as we see a collapse and, when there's consequences to the opposite, when the drama causes real catastrophes and real, the real issues with the civilization and the decadence and the deviance, because people aren't happy. They like the drama, they like the excitement, they like partying, but they're lonely and they're miserable. They're going in the wrong direction. They're detached from the divinity within them, and they're attached from their soul, and that creates loneliness and desperation. And they wish that they could evolve into something better. Deep down, everyone has this desire to break free from this lifestyle that's destroying them in so many different ways. They just can't access it, right? They're just too worn out. They're too bankrupt. They're too, they have no prana. They have no spiritual energy. They have no love inside them anymore. They lost, their innocence. They've lost all these things. And so then they can't reclaim it and bring it back, right? It's like these people who say they're born-again virgins or some shit, which is, a nice idea, at least on a spiritual level, that can happen, but certainly not on a physical level. But people want to reclaim some of the more, the more wholesome things that they rejected in their family or in their environment, and they laughed at when they were kids and thought they were boring, but now they seek those things because they know it's the real deal. They know it's what they really want or what they really should be doing. Like I was saying about the gratefulness meditation, I just given my experience with all of it, in terms of what I've seen happen in Sajmarg and whatever past life experiences I have with this. I know humans will suck the energy out of you. Like if you offer them some kind of spiritual assistance, they'll try to warp it into their thing, right? Their egos will try to get what they want out of it and not, embrace what their soul wants and needs. And their egos will just fucking wreck it. People just wreck it, and they'll make the wrong decisions, and they'll warp shit and turn it into a shitty religion or a cult or wherever the fuck it is, right? And so I'm very wary of that just in general. Like, I don't want to feel resentful. So what I do in terms of the Gratefulness Meditation channel, keeping the Sajmark system alive, I don't want to get to the point where I'm like doing things to such an extent that I feel, resentful of people for failing or not living up to it, or, people bombarded me with requests and, desire-based requests of, how I can help solve their problems for them or whatever it is, because I've seen this before, where it's my reluctance to do more and, more and more and do what others, do what the other people should be doing for themselves, right? And, the Sajmarg masters did that to some extent, and it came back to bite them each time. Because if you're doing things for other people that they should be doing themselves, then, they're not learning to do it for themselves, right? It's like one of those situations where you have to sink or fucking swim. And as long as they're a system that they can, that they can indulge in, they're never going to do it. Like, it's just as long as there's some other avenue of stuff that they can do to not, dive into their spiritual system and embrace the, the more subtle, the more natural lives, they're not going to do it. They just won't do it. Like, it's just the way it is. I mean, that's why the system has to come down, and then we'll see. Even then, that might not be enough for people to do the right thing. People have avoided the divinity within them and their spiritual side for thousands upon thousands of years. And there's a lot of energy and effort going into raising people to a higher level. It just hasn't happened. So that's why you see the Apocalaughs and sort of this one last ditch effort to give people an expedited system that can help them take leaps and bounds in their spiritual life. But for the most part, people will reject it because they're just, they can do it, they just won't. And it's just, it's kind of a sad thing, but it is what it is. All right, so let me wrap this one up here. Okay, maybe greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm not sure whether I'm going to put the voiceovers at the beginning or the end of this video. Today is Saturday, April 22nd. So there's that. Is it the 22nd already? Oh, 12th. All right. I was like, wow, I lost like 10 days. But anyways, let's get rid of the closed captions here. So, a few things to get to. I want to get to the Trump cabinet meeting because that's kind of hilarious. But let's start here.
Biden administration accused of covering up a congressional...
Well, let's go back to the beginning.
Alarming claims. The Biden administration accused of covering up a congressionally mandated report on the earliest suspected American COVID cases. The Washington Free Beacon says the report reveals 7 Americans may have contracted COVID-19 in Wuhan in October 2019. Free Beacon journalist behind the bombshell report is Andrew Kerr, and he is with us now. This is one of the things that you say.
Okay, so we don't need to see anything more about this because it's Fox, and Fox sucks. Just as bad as CNN and MSNBC. But, they'll go after the Biden administration, but not the truth, right? So the thing about it is some of my viewers said that they had COVID in October 2019. One of my viewers, at least maybe a couple of them, no, more than one, left comments saying, they had COVID or knew someone had COVID that fall. Because it takes a long time for things to spread, and COVID is a flu. Like it's a derivative. It's a modified genetically modified bioweapon that comes from the original flu virus. That's why they had the flu be saying it was just the flu, but it wasn't just the flu because it had been fucking modified. But it's the flu virus is only available half the year. And the weird thing about COVID is people were getting it during the summer, right? But in general, the flu is in one hemisphere half the time, and the other hemisphere the other half the time, and it's the winter hemisphere. It's during the winter season here, and so they would have had to release it in the fall for it to get around because it was something new, right? It was something that people hadn't had before because of the being a bioweapon, and so they're saying that these people went to Wuhan, China, and came back to America, or Americans got it to China, Wuhan, and they released it from Wuhan, China, and it went around the world from there. But I never believed that story because, why does China still exist? I mean, if China, like, why is it, Trump is at war with China right now, and everyone's worried about China and China, about their business practices, their economic practices, they're building up the war machine, and just how evil their government is, how shitty they treat their own people, and, all of it. And so China is definitely the number one villain out there. I mean, the United States in our way too, and now with Trump. But why would they let him get away with it, right? It would be such an easy way to get rid of China would be to impose worldwide economic sanctions for them mishandling the Wuhan virus. Well, Fauci was involved, NIH was involved with a lab there, which again is to me bullshit. Like, this was an agreed decision globally because all these countries suffered and they didn't, they're not looking for some kind of, compensation and some way of doing something to China, which would be what you would do because it would be China's fault. Remember, Trump called it the China virus. And yet, they've gotten away with this. They've killed, I mean, it's a bioweapon. This is an act of war. Releasing it, because you could say we did it accidentally. Nobody would believe that shit, right? Oh, we accidentally released a bioweapon? So the official story has never been great. I mean, remember, it was bats, and then it was pangolin. It was all from Wuhan, China, like it was this weird thing, a place nobody even really heard about. And so, this had to be a bioweapon, like it just had to be. And it had to be like, we're going to release this to reduce population, do whatever they were going to do, whatever plan there was. Reducing population at this point, it can take a lot of weight off the global economy. And then there was the vax that followed, so that whole thing. And, it just looks like it had to be staged. And so this is kind of a report because it was available. People were getting it long before. Remember 2020, my family and I were traveling. And we were hearing about this virus. It was called Corona then. Remember, it was coronavirus. And we were in India. And they quarantined people from, I don't know, like somewhere over there, like one of those neighboring countries from China. I remember there's this tall guy who was like 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", big fat English guy with a very, a business guy with a very, very, heavily, an English accent that just stood out, right? And they were in this quarantine thing with these ropes, right? We were in the airport coming through, I don't know where we must have been coming through. I guess we got to India and we flew through, one of those rich, Arab countries. It wasn't Dubai, but it was like one of those things, one of those fancy airports. And then we were in, wherever it was in India, one of the, we landed somewhere in India, then we took a flight to Hyderabad. And so we're coming in through customs. And this guy roped these people off coming from, one of those, I mean, I'm a little bit groggy this morning, but whatever it was. One of those countries that, like, China is oppressing, Taiwan or one of those things, the other one. And they were coming in a flight from there. And there was some news, like, in the airports, they're talking about the coronavirus my kids had heard about and told me about. They had heard about it. And so this guy was like, fuck this, and he gets up, he just storms out of the ropes and goes about his business like it didn't hold him. And there was people that were pushing past us to get through customs, like this Asian woman just rudely pushed past us because she had been held up in the quarantine. and she was going to miss her flight or whatever it was, because we had to go through customs before taking it the next flight. So, you know, it was like this thing that happened, and we got back from India, and it was just starting to, you know, make it into America. And more importantly, they covered for China. Like Fauci still isn't saying it would happen in Wuhan. Like whatever, till his last days, until he disappears. He's retired now and he's gone and whatever. He's got pardoned by Biden and all that shit. And he was still pushing the bat thing, right? Like just goofy. And so no, it wasn't just, everyone was covering from China because, you know, China could just come out and say, if they got accused, they could just say, hey, we all agreed upon this in your own countries. Because China's people would, you know, totally expect them to get bioweaponed by their own government, right? Like they're all, you know, I mean, they know I mean, whatever's going on there, it's totally oppressive. But the rest of the world, like, you know, the European countries trying to explain to their people, America trying to explain to Americans that they were involved in this, right? That it was something where they you know, they bioweaponed their own people. So, you know, that, I mean, it just, that's the only thing that makes sense, right? That this was agreed upon, because there would be, you know, for one, like I said, two things would have to happen. One, it would be fuck China. And two, it would be fuck you guys playing around with these labs. You can't play around anymore because you leaked something, right? Like, you know, you can only make that mistake once, because they got worse bioweapons. They've got these horrible bioweapons. And to say that something started with a leak, well, that's, you know, it isn't like some man-made developing natural virus. It's something that's been leaked, right? Some kind of thing that's been gain of function has been fucked around with and then leaked. And you can't, you know, these weapons are fucking stupid, these bioweapons, because you can't contain them to one country. You know, you're going to release it in a country, it's going to spread like it was world travel, right? And what you did, it spread all over the fucking world. And that, again, you know, would have to be, I mean, for it to spread like in 1 year like that, you know, every country around the world had cases of COVID. And so, you know, I mean, it was, you know, whatever it was in terms of its being contagious, but Jesus Christ. So, you know, this had to be something they agreed upon. You know, they want a global depopulation, and then they were able to roll out that mNRA vax stuff and all that stuff that's now, you know, people have in their systems. And so, you know, it was a set thing. It was like fucking agreed upon thing, because, you know, you always want to get to the bottom of things, right? And they didn't want to get to the bottom of this. Like, you can tell the things that are staged because they don't really ever investigate them truly, and they don't really push for, you know, when there's a cause, like what they didn't do with the economic collapse of 2008. You know, they were saying they were just derivatives things, and, you know, comes out, but they didn't really put that much emphasis into blame, right? In fact, the people that they blamed for the economic collapse of 2008, you know, was mostly American banks. I mean, it was the derivatives market and credit default swaps and all that shit. And, you know, they were put in charge of fixing it, right? Just like the, you know, the people who released the bioweapon were the guys who did gain of function. You know, Fauci was in charge of the whole thing. Like, Fauci was like the Pope of, you know, the new religion of science for a bit. Like, he was pushing this religion of science bullshit, and, well, we gotta trust the science. Well, the science just fucking released a bioweapon, right? So fucking, you know, so, I mean, it was like a fucked up thing. And, you know, the only explanation is that they all knew about it, they agreed upon it, and there was this sense of, let's not talk about it, because every country would be culpable. Like, every group of leaders would have had to sign off on this thing. And they would have to go to their people saying, yeah, we bioweaponed you purposefully. You know, the leadership, that party, those people, you know, that'd be over. And Trump, of course, and Biden were both a part of that. So it was both the Republicans and the Democrats. And, you know, Trump was saying China virus. The Democrats were saying bats, Fauci, you know, like, remember, and just whatever it was. But Trump, why aren't they still talking about that? Like, you know, China fucking bioweaponed the whole world then, if that's the story. They killed, you know, millions of American people. That's a fucking act of war. Why is China not a fucking giant hole, where China used to be, right? Like complete obliteration of fucking China, because it can't be them. It could not be them all alone. Like they're already a threat. I mean, it's just all of it. And so, any of these things that are acts of war, like you don't want to go to war with China, is that where that they got you on the ball? Like, what's happening? Like the whole world, no one wanted to speak up about it, right? Saying, fuck China, they screwed us, they killed our people, whatever. Okay, so this popped up on my toolbar, sidebar, and so let's give it a whirl.
Tonight, this message is gaining steam.
Okay, so there was a town hall 1 hour and 12 minutes away from this. This is, must be Friday night. For some reason, my freaking closed captions on. Their town hall, CNN town hall, America asks Congress.
So let me say very simply, I want more babies in the United States of America.
Well, it's led to what's called the pro-natalist movement, and it's getting more popular because of messages from Vice President Vance and Elon Musk, who, of course, has at least 13 children with multiple women. CNN's Mina Durst
Boom. Kaboom.
is out front at the 2025 Natal Conference, because, yes, there is a conference.
Raise your hand if you are a mom or a dad in the room here tonight. This is the war for civilization, and we are going to win it one life at a time.
Boom. They need more babies.
Here at NatalCon, which is a gathering of about 200 people from all over the world who have come here because they all feel very strongly that the world needs more babies.
There's a civilizational catastrophe coming in.
For people who don't like people, right? The majority of people don't like other people, and don't like half the people. I can understand this from a political perspective, but again, politics, it's rigged anyway. So, the birth rate's going down, and this was part of a plan, like a global plan. Like the whole COVID thing was a population reduction plan, and the way to reduce the population is reduce the birth rate. People think it's to kill people, and that's that works to whatever extent, but it's really about the amount of people being born. Like you have to reduce the amount of people being born more than you have to reduce the people who are dying. Because you can, part of the thing was there were a lot of boomers and stuff that died during COVID. Like it affected the boomers. And that's like, Social Security is being taxed, and the elderly people are a drain on your system because they don't contribute anything. Like I used to talk about celebrities when there was these like Illuminati blood sacrifices. And a celebrity, especially someone like Michael Jackson or Prince, someone who produces content, their value in being alive decreases. Like an artist's value, an artist when they're producing art, whether it be music or especially like an artist, like people who do paintings and, produce, art. Their value goes up when they die. And so they have these royalties, and they have these, the body of work that now they're getting like all this money from, especially like something like the Beatles, and where they, these songs are played over and over again in movies and TV shows and things. And so Michael Jackson had the rights to all the Beatles music, all the publishing for the Beatles, and then his own music. And he wasn't producing any more music. He wasn't going on doing really any more tours or concerts. He was more or less retired. And so now he's got a lot of value, but he's just pissing it away with his weird, kid stuff, his, pedo stuff in his, Neverland Ranch. And then he becomes valuable being dead. Like then this stuff can be, taken away, right? All this stuff that like he's no longer an asset because he's not producing new content. And so, the elder generation is just, the epitome of useless eaters. And now with America, they have Social Security and pensions and all this shit. And they're a drain on the economy, multiple properties, all these things. Whining, just being baby boomers. voting for whatever. They're just, a huge block of population that's not doing anything but sucking up resources. And what you want is to have a lot of young people. Your country's at its best when the baby boomers was in their 20s. Youth represents potential, like all the work that they're going to create, all the inventions, all the stuff that became the tech boom, the Silicon Valley, all that stuff, right? And so, they want to get rid of old people, and that's reduces the population, but they're going to die anyway. Like, that's good for the economy. But in terms of stopping the population growth, you have to stop babies being born. And they've pushed abortion and contraceptives and, all kinds of things, of Wi-Fi, every possible way to, reduce the whole thing, the population. And, yeah. My wife was telling me that polyester reduces, like, the sperm count. And, they had it so where men are, like, the average man has, there's just as their sperm count is decreased by half, and it gets any lower, they won't be able to father children. Like, it's just like on the brink. It's just teetering on the brink of being, some men are already below, a lot more are below, what you need. Like, the baseline, the average right now is right at that point. If it goes any lower, they won't be able to father children. And so this is depopulation. And Vance is, he's a piece of shit. So, he's, whatever thing he's doing here. And, there just should be less people. Like, it just should be that. Like, we're going to have that one way or another.
The way to solve it is to have sex. Like, that's got to be the easiest pitch in history.
Birth rates around the world are plummeting, and they think this is the issue of our time.
It's a massive conversation, and that's why we're here.
We need to encourage more people to get married and have kids. We need those people to be the people of the future.
Oh, the white people are down. White people are the ones that are suffering the worst birth rates. European countries and the white people in those countries, right? Like Muslim, there's going to be like a Muslim takeover of countries in Europe.
Many countries are no longer having enough kids to replace their populations. Some experts predict this will cause labor shortages and inflation, permanently changing the economy. The people most passionate about this call themselves pronatalists.
People are like, why are high fertility people always so weird?
Malcolm and Simone Collins have 4 kids, soon to be 5, and are some of the loudest advocates for pronatalism.
What we've seen is pronatalism and demographic collapse have become the global warming of the right. Some of the first people who really recognize the scale of the problem are major players in the White House right now.
Why is she wearing a head covering, bro? You just said that your glasses and your fucking where's Waldo vibe. Like, the people who are pronatalists are really weird, and we're the personification of that.
Like J.D. Vance and Elon Musk.
The birth rate is very low in almost every country, and it's something, unless that changes, civilization will disappear.
Elon Musk.
White people, look at him, there he goes.
Fixation with population collapse has pushed pronatalism into the spotlight. His tweets about NatalCon helped double attendance for this year's event, where the tickets cost $1,000.
Yes, I spent all of my savings coming here, actually.
Do you want to have kids?
Yes.
You don't have kids?
No, not.
How many do you want to have?
Well, minimum 5. I want to have my first at 22, and then I want to have.
Okay, you gotta get on that.
Yeah, I know.
Organizers said they heard a lot of interest in matchmaking, so they gave yellow wristbands to singles to help them find each other.
You have a yellow wristband.
Yes.
So you're
you're
open to mingling.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Have you met anybody good?
Well, I'm not sure if you can tell.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of lads here. There's not that many ladies.
The speakers are.
The pronatalists are all men, right? That whole thing about this is to do with the what's that stupid ass show which I didn't watch. That show on Netflix with the women wearing women are being forced to carry kids. I'll think about it later, whatever it is. It'll come to me. But I'm a little bit groggy in the morning when I start off these videos sometimes. And so that horrible show, with the whole premise is that men wanted to impregnate women, which is the premise of a lot of these, these women's abortion movements, that men really want to impregnate women. But most men don't. Most men don't want kids. and don't want the responsibility of kids, don't want to pay child support, don't want to raise kids. I mean, certainly, outside of marriage, these things where you have these like rich athletes and people, and they get they're with these these hoes that get pregnant, and then they have to pay them millions of dollars in child support, things like that, right? This idea of men don't want that. Like, men want sex without the responsibility of the kids. That's part of this culture. But then they push this idea that men came up with these forced. It was a man who came up with abortion. It was a man that came up with birth control. All these things, right? And so, it's I mean, that should be clear to everybody. Handmaid's Tale, that show, Handmaid's Tale. And so it's a stupid premise. But now you see that there's this push now. This is more about white people, because white people are doing really badly in Europe, some of these European countries, and your birth rate goes down below something, and the country never recovers. And the birth rate of white people in America and then all these European countries have gone down significantly. And, it's being propped up by Muslim immigrants. Immigrants have a lot of kids. And, in America and these other countries. It's kind of, in these European countries, they have a lot of people coming from the Middle East, Muslim people. And their population is growing, and the white people just aren't having kids. There are places like this is what happens when you end up having a service economy and people just want to enjoy their lives, right? There's, they don't want to have kids. Like there's a whole movement, I forget what they talk about it, but it's they're anti having kids, moms who are anti having kids. They don't want to wreck their lives by having to be a mom. These things, people who are professionals. And one of the ways to reduce population is lifestyle and education, by raising people's quality of life and education. And then they're like, oh, I don't want to have kids. I'm too happy, and so this is a whole thing. And, that's happening for white people. And so they're not having kids, and their birth rates have gone down in these countries. And some of them are gone below their ability to recover. There's this thing I saw in Italian men who want to live with their moms until they're 50. And then they think about marriage, and even then it's kind of too late, right? So, when you have that kind of situation, you stop having kids, and the next thing you know, the population it's a numbers game after that, and it's just, you can't recover. It's just every generation, your population has to be above 2.1 for you to sustain your population. And that's happened to all these empires around the world. That's eventually what happens. They don't have kids as much. People get educated, they get better quality of life, and they're they don't need kids. People who are poor people, they need kids to do work around the farm and these things. And it's, part of a cultural type situation, religion. When people stop believing in their religion, be fruitful in these things, be fruitful and multiply. And so this is, these desperate people who, white people pushing for this, and it's like a man thing, because it's so women would naturally want to have kids, but you've brought them into the workplace, right? The CIA movement was for depopulation, because when women start working and they start being able to, they don't need a man to, as a sort of a whatever breadwinner, or they don't need a man to, to be the hunter-gatherer type model, and they don't have community with women, the whole thing, and you devalue babies, this thing, just a mom, oh, you're just a mom, right? I'm just a mom. You have to be a mom, but you also have to be a CEO, right? You have to be a mom, but you also have to have a successful career, because when you meet your friends, they're like, what are you doing professionally? Oh yeah, you're a mom, but what else, right? So, being a mom is fucking a full-time job, being a wife and mother, but now that's not, with both parents working, and it's the kids become just a hassle, it's they're no longer some fulfillment of your life's goal and these things. And people are no longer religious, so there's no pressure on this. And so the people who are often religious are less educated, less, whatever it might be, right? So, people who are more traditional, and so they're the ones who are still having kids. people who vote Republican are more likely to have, more kids than these liberal, white people in the cities. And so, there's a push for this, but everything else is trending the other way, right? And COVID was a part of that. Like COVID was a depopulation, tool, because we see these kids now, the ones who got the bloop, they're not it's gonna fuck their ability to have kids, and Wi-Fi also, like all that stuff, especially for men and their sperm count. And so, like, it's going to be harder and harder. There's that great movie, Children of Men. It's one of my favorite movies. It's just a well done movie, and there's the movie starts off with the youngest person in the world is an 18-year-old kid from England, and he's just died. Like, he's a prick. Nobody liked him, and he's dead. And they're like mourning this youngest person because everyone else is 18 years old and above. There's no kids because no one's able to get pregnant. No one's able to have children. It's just all of a sudden like it's the human population is going to disappear, right?
Are largely dry economist types, focused on tweaks to boost birth rates, from tax credits to housing. But politically, the vibe is firmly right-wing.
The marginal people need to go back to the margins.
We want to raise families. The left is raising pride flags over cat shelters.
In 2024 actually did have a slight uptick in births. Bad news. It was just the anchor babies from the illegal immigrants.
It's pretty difficult to draw a neat, tidy circle around everybody here. The far right or the extreme right, like, we would like to have more babies, but we would like to have more of our babies. On the other end, people like more babies are always good, whether it's babies or immigrants. And the other axis, trad Catholics, Mormons, and then like a kind of tech bro or tech futurist genetic selection of embryos, trying to refine the quality of the babies that are born.
All right, so there's that. Somebody sent me something from Joe Rogan. I didn't get to watch it, but it was a clip. Maybe it popped up, I don't know. But he was interviewing some guy, and he was talking about how China is totally genetically modifying their babies, and they're doing all that shit because they're cloning and all that stuff, right? Cloning is they can clone a human. It's illegal, and so they're cloning humans, right? We know that, and so there's human clones out there and genetically modified people out there, and I often talked about how I thought Michael Phelps, some of these athletes were genetically modified people because the way Michael Phelps was a perfect swimmer the way he was built. And one of the things was he has half the lactic acid in his muscles. So it takes him half the time to recover from, doing physical activity. And so he had just this perfect swimmer's body, like just, short legs and big feet and just, long torso and long arms and, all these things, right? And then he had this lactic acid thing, like, how's that happen? Something like that, like these, whatever it is. So, they're fucking around with the genetics and they're doing all this shit. And it's, and there's all this weird stuff happening and they need to reduce population and, it's going to happen. And there'll be a point where it's going to be really hard for people to get pregnant. And that's, that's coming. And then it'll be population reduction time, plus the cataclysms in the world shit that's going on. Okay, we have Caroline Levitt here, the fake Christian Barbie truther. Just one more thing. Like, if J.D. Vance says to have more kids, right? Or Elon Musk does, like, is that a reason to have kids? It's a big commitment that you'd be influenced by these dopes. But here we go.
So the administration, I have an administration source who's telling me that we're weeks away from the first deal with the country over tariffs. Where is the administration? How soon can we see that? And what country is that, the first one?
I won't reveal or get ahead of our trade team as these negotiations are obviously ongoing, but I can tell you very good progress has been made. Jameson Greer was on television this morning and I spoke to him and he confirmed that more than 15 offers are already on the table, which is remarkable in just a mere matter of days. And
okay, so those offers would be superficial, right? Like they would have taken those offers. So if they have offers on the table, you would take the offers. If they were good offers, right? Like Trump could use wins here. Like if there was 15 offers that were quality offers, they would take all of them and announce we have 15 new deals that are better for the United States. Trump's fucking bullshit thing he did was working and winning, and we have these great deals. And, they can call anything a good deal if it isn't. But if it's at least better than what it is now, and which it will be, it'll be a little bit better, they could take all these deals and just start saying, we've got a better deal. So they've got to be pretty bullshit offers, right? Like it's got to be pretty bad. And again, making deals with all these countries and stabilizing this for, this time, then they could go to war with China. Because then they would have more allies. They've made these trade deals with these other countries. If it's all about China, then deal with the China problem. And then, you can't fight all these wars and go after Greenland and shit all over Denmark and try to, reclaim the Panama Canal and change the fucking name of the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. You do all that kind of bullshit. And then, you're fighting too many battles, right? And losing most of them. And then have leaks from your fucking security team and, fighting the war in Israel. And, it's a genocide of the Palestinian people. You're doing too many things, and you're weakening. Like now you have all these young people they're one-issue people that are horrified by the genocide in Palestinian people. You're fighting too many battles. So make all these deals, get the stock market and everything more solid, and go after China. And that's what you should have done in the first place. And so these deals suck, if they do even have deals. Right? They might not even have deals or offers.
As I said earlier, we've heard from more than 75 countries around the world. This is a team effort. The president has a team of great, brilliant advisors who have been with him every step of the way, and all of them will be divvying up the workload. And I just want to give the president and his trade team credit for taking this on. This is a massive undertaking. There's no doubt about it.
Just like what I said. It's a massive undertaking. Like he's doing too much shit, right? You're just spread thin.
Take it very seriously. The president is determined to renegotiate global trade on behalf of American workers. And again, you've seen people on both sides of the aisles calling for this for years, but I think no other president lacked the courage or maybe the work ethic or the stamina.
No other president lacks the courage? You just shit on your own guy there.
And again, you've seen people on both sides of the aisles calling for this for years, but I think no other president lacked the courage or maybe the work ethic or the stamina to take.
So they didn't lack it like Trump does? You just shit on him. You shit on his courage. You shit on his work ethic. You shit on his stamina. Because he doesn't have any of those things, right? He comes out and he does a meeting. He likes to do public shit. And he tells all the people what he wants to have happen. And he goes, handle it, right? From that old show. He says, you guys take care of it.
Take on such a task. And I know there were some questions about the president's delayed departure earlier to Walter Reed. I'd like to address it was because he's working on this very issue, so he was running a bit behind this morning.
He's running behind. Or he's recovering from his Adderall. His addiction, his pill popping ways. Okay, so Mr. Wonderful was on this panel, so let's watch this before we get into the Trump thing.
What happens if we go into a full-scale trade war?
Look, it's really ugly. This president won the election based on reducing costs.
It's really ugly. This president won the election, reducing costs. Now we're doing something else.
But he's enacted the largest tax increase we've seen in over 50 years. And you know who's going to pay the price? Americans shopping at Walmart, Americans shopping at Costco. We don't know.
Americans shopping at Walmart and Costco and these other places?
The purpose of these tariffs. The only thing we do know is he's planning on taking tax revenue from Americans paying more at Walmart and Costco and putting that into tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. It's totally gross, and it's putting us on the brink of a recession.
It's totally gross. This dude just said it's totally gross. Well, please don't.
Could cost us tons of manufacturing jobs as we get into this trade war. It's a really disturbing policy. I hope he backs off.
But Kevin, he said there's a lot of deals that they're literally kissing his ass was the phrase he used, very eloquently. Where are the deals?
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that
I
look
want
like?
Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. It's just not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans.
Look, they have a countdown here. This is from last night or 2 nights ago. 54 minutes and 11 seconds to 104% tariffs on China.
Who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning. He'll tell you why. Xi can only stay the supreme leader if people are employed. If we wipe out any business there, because we are still 39% of all consumables on Earth and 25% of the world's GDP, America is the #1 economy on Earth with all the cards. We will not have that forever. It's time to squeeze Chinese heads into the wall now.
Well,
I'm
hold
not
on
talking
a
about
second,
tariffs
Kevin.
on
Well,
60.
I hear you, but hold on. If we're talking about people, the average consumer, not necessarily
So we heard this before, but let's see how this other people react here.
the head honchos of businesses all across the globe, can they withstand the pressure of that sort of tax on the
It's
goods they're going to have?
short-lived. There will be
But what's your timeline compared to, you don't know the average American's timeline, what they can actually survive. There's people right now who can't survive a
400%
month.
tomorrow morning, cheese on an airplane to Washington to cut a deal.
What do you think?
You know, here's the thing, though. This is the perfect example of, I understand how it would benefit you, but that's not what the American people voted for. They voted because Trump said within 24 hours, costs will come down.
Trump supporters, by the way, you're talking about,
Well,
especially.
Trump said that and there were people in the middle who said, okay, I'm going to vote for that. He also said he'd end the wars. That's not happening. We still have supply chain issues. So I just filled up my tank yesterday. Gas prices are not down. Rent, groceries, prices are not down. And when people are looking what's happening in the markets and they...
You know, it's just silly. They're all just silly little people, right? Because the reality is China is that bad. Like no one's saying to Kevin Leary, you're full of shit. Like, you know, Mr. Wonderful. And, you know, whatever exaggeration he's saying here, everybody knows China does exactly what he says they do, right? And so that is, they're evil. And evil in the sense that they made God illegal in their country. That's the first part of it. Because any country that does that, because China used to have rich spiritual tradition and history, but now communism capitalism, the isms, they're all evil and they're all whatever they are. You know, America's evil is a little bit more subtle in the sense that, you know, you're pretending to be good, but just the distractions and the abundance of materiality here makes it very easy to forget about God, right? And so, you know, this the issue here is that China and America are locked together, and you know, in this partnership, and you know, China is influencing all these other countries around the world. They've made deals with this abomination of a government and these people that are suffering there, and we've been okay with it this whole time because, you know, the reason Trump is doing this is because Trump's like a dumb fuck, and he doesn't see the bigger picture, and he just doesn't care because he'll bankrupt a company and he just doesn't care. Like he'll take shots at stuff and never be his fault when it implodes, and so Trump is addressing a real problem, but not with a real solution. And so there is a real problem with China, which Kevin O'Leary was talking about, but there's no real solution. There's no real solution to any of these things. The birth population, you know, all these things. You know, it's not just whether people want to have children, it's also can they have children. Like all these things are trending in a certain direction because the civilization has to come down. That's what I've been saying. Like just accepting it because no matter what you do, there's no solution. There's no way this thing survives. There's no way that your current lifestyle survives the next 10 years, next 20 years. You know, it's going to get worse each time. And there'll be people who, you know, that once the value goes down of the illusionary value of currency, everything falls apart. And then, you know, how do people get motivated to do work, and how do people contribute? How do the people get compensated? You know, how do people survive when there isn't a system, when there isn't grocery stores and things? And so that's what we're looking at. And they're not preparing you for it. There should be some energy and money going into, you know, pockets of the future. The idea of pockets of the future. That people who can survive, you know, just in case, people who aren't willing to admit that this is going to happen, at least admit that it might happen. And everyone can at least admit that this is a big possibility right now. The end of our civilization as we now know it. Like they're running on this. They're saying, if you guys don't vote for us, it's the end. You know, we're fighting for the soul of America. Trump's saying it'll be the end. It'll be World War III. America will be over if Biden got elected. He's destroyed. You know, these are the things. This is the rhetoric. So you're admitting that there's a possibility, and Elon Musk said it when he, you know, these. Well, let me run those two memes here.
The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending like over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here. And taking a lot of flack, and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I mean, I'd like to stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. And I'm confident at this point, knock on wood, you know, knock on my wooden head, there's got a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
You know, Trump is gambling with World War III. But World War III and bankruptcy, Elon Musk said bankruptcy, you know, that the collapse of the economy, it'd be impossible to pay off the debt, right? So these are things being talked about by both parties and everyone everywhere. You know, it's on the table that we might not be able to pull this one out, despite all your indoctrination, all your training, all the things you've been told about America, and this, that, and the other thing, right? And all the, you know, ways that we always turn it around, and all this shit that you've been told, that there's a possibility that this is it, right? That this is the end, right? This is like we're flirting with death, right? We've gotten a terminal diagnosis, and there's treatment, but the possibility of death is always there. Even if you're not sick, but certainly if you are. And so, you know, they're all saying, you know, we're on the brink of really, you know, a drastic change to your lifestyle, economic collapse, food collapse, energy collapse, any of these things, World War III, any number of things, right? You know, like there's a meteor heading for the Earth. And it may hit, it may not, and then there might be any number of possibilities where, you know, it's extinction level event on one hand, or just some level of disruption and you know, tidal waves or whatever it might be, right? Some things and, you know, worldwide, you know, issues that might not be the end of it, but might be like less severe, but still pretty bad, right? So there's these things like that, right? You know, when we're in World War II, they had these things called victory gardens. You know, start growing food in your lawn because you might need it, right? This kind of thing. You know, women going into the workforce because men had to go. This is what started this whole thing about women working and not, you know, just being stay-at-home moms. Was, I mean, there was some desire for that, but World War II, there was all the men were over, young men were fighting in World War II. So these types of things. So, this is what we have to do. Like just acknowledge that this is a possibility and start helping people prepare for a backup plan in case the system implodes to whatever degree. Even if it isn't just, if it's less good, like let's say it's 50% less good, it's still there, 50% less things in the grocery store. These types of things. You're paying twice as much for gas, in terms of your ability to afford things. And so what can you do to supplement your issues? Like your money is no longer capable of supplying for you what you need in terms of your foods and your food, your rent, these things. Like everything's more expensive than it used to be, and your pay is the same. So what can you do? What other things can you do to, growing food, for example, or what kind, how can you learn to go without and things? What changing your lifestyle, building community. These are the things, and just say it like this is a possibility. And so let's prepare for it. Let's not just sit here idle. We have free time, and what can we do? And then again, the most important thing, connect to divinity within you, which is going to be the outcome. Like everything that I know about this is that there's one solution, and that's people go and connect with their soul and connect with the divinity within them, and they connect with God. Most people are scared of God because they know what they're doing is bullshit. And so you have this fear of God when you're living a way that you don't want. If you're an addict and you're behaving badly and you're doing shit that you're ashamed of, right? Graphic porn addiction or some kind of, drug addiction or just bad thoughts that you're shielding from other people, but you're having those thoughts, and you don't want to go in front of God, like you're ashamed of what you think and what you do and what's going on inside of you. You're whatever you may or may not gotten away with in your life. You're scared, afraid to go for God. You're scared to die, and you're scared of facing up to it, right, in a spiritual level, because they know, right. Like this idea of St. Peter standing at the gates of heaven, they know. They have your lists, right? So people who have behaved in such a way that they're scared of, like, they're like, I can't go in front of God. Like, fucking God will chew me out, right? God will tell me what a piece of shit I am. So, like reconciling all that stuff, like whatever you've done, realizing that, you can still redeem yourself in some way. And whatever, you've been as a person, you can always change. And so, tell people you're going to have to change. Like, it's not the other guy, it's not the other party. Everyone wants to hear we got to defeat the other party. We got to push down this movement. It's none of that shit. Americans suck. People in the world suck. We all have our particular individual suckiness, and we all have to deal with it. We just all have to do better. And that starts with connecting with God. And, you have to know what to do. And the way you know what to do is you connect to the divinity within you. You form a relationship with your soul. And then when you're going to make a decision, you have that connection and you can see what the right decision is. If you don't have that relationship, you can never see the right, the right decision, because you're not connected to the divinity. You might make the right decision, but it won't be because you see it from a divine perspective. It's just like you're throwing a dart against the wall, and sometimes you make the right decision. But if you're connected to the divinity within you, then God tells you and shows you. Use your heart as an instrument to connect and feel what God wants you to do. And you just have this feeling, this is the right thing. And then once you're doing that, like everybody does that, the world will change dramatically, because people won't do bullshit things because their hearts won't let them. And so this is when people get hard. They tell you to be hard and not soft. This whole idea of, being a pussy if you're soft. And so like this, American masculinity, American competitiveness, this kind of bullshit. It's the hardness that keeps you from feeling the softness, the compassion and the empathy and the things inside of you, that you won't make these horrible decisions, because you won't sleep well at night. You'll feel bad about what you've realized you've made a fucking mistake, and you've hurt other people or animals or the environment or whatever, and you've gone against God's will, and then you're not ashamed to go before God, because you're working with God to make the right decisions. And you look forward to God's company because God is guiding you in the right direction. This is what Master Charji, the third master of the system, said. Christians are afraid of God because they want God's son. They're like, hey, Jesus, can you talk to your father for me? Right? This is the whole idea behind Christianity. that you don't go to the Father because he scares the shit out of you, so you go to the Son. The Father presented in the Jewish faith in the Old Testament as this, vindictive, wrathful God that's going to, come down on you and constantly be. I mean, every time God showed up, he was fucking cursing and slamming people and telling them to sacrifice their kids and that bullshit, right? It's not how God really is. So people are scared to go to God, right? So you want, hey, Jesus, can you talk to your dad for me? Like it's a great perspective. And you see that a lot with Americans. People are, they live in lives where they don't want to have God mirror back to them. I mean, that's what God is. When you start meditating and you can connect the divinity within you, there's a mirror. And you start seeing yourself as other people see you and as God sees you. And you don't like the fucking reflection you're seeing back, so you have to change. You feel like a piece of shit. The things that you've developed all these psychological mechanisms to stop yourself from seeing yourself as you truly are. And, you rationalize your decision making, and you put up these barriers so you don't get reflected back to you what you really are as a person. And then once you get that, then you're like, oh, I got to change. Like I have to. Like, look at that, I'm a piece of shit, right? And so this is what needs to happen. Anyway, let's go to the Trump thing here. So Master Chargy, the third master of the Sajmark system, came to America one time, and he made a joke. He said, not the Chinese. Something like that. He said something, and he goes, that's a joke. But almost like he was, of course, India and China have had issues, but he was basically saying that, some kind of conflict between America and China is going to happen. And so this was like 2007, 2008. Let me clarify that. He said something to the effect, like something came up about the Chinese. He said, oh, not the Chinese. Like it was clearly saying something. Then he was like, that's a joke. But there was, like some kind of prediction had been made about America and the Chinese going to the war. Like it was a thing. This was like years ago. Like I said, 2007, 2008, I think. 2006 maybe, I don't know. I went and looked for the talk. This guy Dodgy has scrubbed all these talks. And I was there when it happened, when he said it. And I was like, well, that was weird what he said. Like almost like, like a warning. And I found a talk for 2011, and he was talking about the various countries around the world. And I thought, well, maybe it was this talk. But what he said there was, China has entered into the nuclear, technological world, and they'll one day equal or say exceed other countries, right? Which is, of course, happened now. And so the stuff with China is they're coming for America. Like it's like a rival, right? When you're a dynasty, an empire, another empire is challenging you. And Americans are weak and soft and entitled and, just worn out and we're kind of over it and, don't take it for granted. And China is a hungry country that's pushing and has a strategy to take America down, right? It has a strategy where they're using American dollars now to someday, whatever it is, through a war, through economic war, whatever. And, Trump is acknowledging this, at least in part, because he sees the dope and he doesn't think things through. And he's expediting it. Maybe on their behalf, maybe China wants him to do this, right? Where they can take America down and then America gets the blame for it or whatever. We don't know what's going to happen here. But we know that this is inevitable. We should know it's inevitable because America can't be on top forever. It doesn't happen. That's not, empires don't last, right? So let's start here.
We let it get out of control. And country's running. We're trying to get the world to treat us fairly. This is something that should have been done 25 years ago, and it wasn't. Should have been done 40 years ago, and it wasn't. But no president was willing to take it on, but you had to. It's not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable. And
again, the word sustainable. That's the Democratic word, which means that if you allow this to keep on going, it'll bring down America and maybe the global economy. Like the unsustainable means that this thing's going to end and end badly. And so they're acknowledging the possibility that this shit won't work out. And he's throwing this stuff out there, not knowing the consequences, not knowing what every other country's going to do, not know what China's going to do, not know what the American, the world investors are going to do, what the markets are going to do. All these things, they're up for grabs, right? And so he has no idea what his terror things are going to do because nobody could know. And this guy isn't thoughtful, and he isn't prophetic, and he doesn't see things correctly. You know, he sees a real problem, and he's throwing a fucking hammer at it, hoping that it works out, right? Dropping a bomb on it.
As you know, without a lot of money being added, which is a lot of money that we could add, the country is making approximately $2 billion a day. And when you think of it, that's...
Okay, so let's watch this part and move forward.
Very private meetings, but we have nothing to hide. And I think it's good. I think it's a good... we want to be... A word you like to use, Jeff, is transparent. So we want to be transparent, and we'll do that by starting with Pete. Go ahead, Pete.
Yes, Mr. President, we just got back from Panama last night. We were at the Panama Canal with our Southcom commander ships, F-18s, troops, and signed a couple of historic deals. One which is with the Panama Canal Authority, a framework for U.S. vessels, first and free through the Panama Canal. Right. And then also a memorandum of understanding with their security minister for the presence of U.S. troops. Fort Sherman is an old U.S. base there, as well as their naval station and air station, jointly with Panama to secure the Panama Canal from Chinese influence. That's something you said we're taking back.
Boom, they're taking that. So they go through around the table talking about all the shit they're doing that's good, because that's what Trump does. Boom, we got the canal back.
Very excited.
Good. Thank you very much.
Way to go back to this guy.
Now, and I think you're going to see historic deals one after the other. And then I'm very excited that within a week and a half, we're going to start with the gold card. And the Trump card is coming out, and we're very excited about that. And that's coming soon. So very excited.
The gold card and the Trump card. Wait, let's go back a little bit here.
Very good. Howard?
So, so we've have so many countries to talk to. It is, it's incredible. I think
it's incredible. Everything's going great.
Scott and I, I'm not sure.
This is what they do at sales things, right? They go around, they talk about how great everything's going, like it's a sales meeting.
We have enough time in the day to talk to all these countries because they want to talk and they want to talk now, and they have come with offers that they never, ever, ever would have come with, but for the moves that the president has made.
Boom. It's the Trump card and the gold card. We'll have to look that up.
$1 billion, and we're trying to figure that out. And then they hire de Blasio, and now we're well on our way to getting, as we call it, the great big beautiful bill. It's a beauty.
It's a beauty of a bill. Fucking
like
beautiful.
We're trying to get it all into one beautiful bill. It's tax cuts, regulation cuts, and many other things. The border, a lot of money for the border. What you do?
As you said, was quite good, and energy prices are down more than 20% since
no way. I didn't know things were so great.
January 20th.
Amazing.
Great, good job, fucking Scott Bissett, you fucking ghoulish motherfucker.
Yeah.
President, we've had some great wins in the last few days.
Did we? I thought you guys might have some bad news, but it doesn't sound like it. What were the wins, Pam Bondi?
That you were overwhelmingly elected by the biggest majority. The U.S. Americans want you to be president.
The U.S. Americans.
Because of your agenda.
Your agenda they want, Trump.
And the courts are ruling that you have the authority to determine how the money of this country will be spent.
You do, because of this majority.
That's what the American citizens wanted, and that's what they're getting.
That's what they're fucking getting. They're getting that shit.
Thank you very much. Lori, please.
Mr. President, accountability matters. That's
accountability matters.
We're recognizing with our partners at the Department of Labor for Government Efficiency. Just a few weeks ago, we realized there's about $4.4 billion in COVID funds that were not used, that the state coffers were just holding on to. Out of that, we've returned $1.4 billion back to the state treasury, so essentially to the American people.
No way. Well, fucking, they're doing good shit all over the place.
24,000 older than the oldest person.
Definitely did.
Fucking Elon's up there.
That's and what are we doing about that? How do we get that money back?
Yeah, so we're working with our IGs to do that further investigation.
Elon's
the history of the nation for the lowest number of encounters at the border, which is absolutely remarkable. You have said that America's laws matter and that they'll be enforced, and we're hard at work now to get people to go back home that are here illegally. So the Alien Registration Act has been in place long enough now that...
So that's Kristi Noem. Let me show you a little thing on Kristi Noem here, then we'll come back to this. So it's the title of this video is Noem Turns Homeland Security Role into Cringy Costume Theater. And I've noticed her costumes. It's a bad day when this dude, Rachel Maddow, gets to make fun of you, and it hits. It's not like some bullshit liberal thing.
Here she is wearing what appears to be a bulletproof vest at a meeting in
So I've pointed this out myself, right?
New York City. Here she is in full Customs and Border Patrol uniform costume.
It's like those Barbies, like they have Malibu Barbie, and the Barbie has these different costumes. Like she puts this shit on that has nothing to do with her job, right?
On set at Fox News. She is not a Customs and Border Patrol agent, but she had them make her a uniform, I guess, including the hat. Here's another hat. Here's her in a cowboy hat, because why not? Here she is at the southern border.
It sucks if Rachel Maddow gets to laugh at you and it's legitimate burns. It's the worst.
A horse? Because sure, what's a cowboy hat without a horse a few feet below it?
It's just so fake. And the fact that there's Trumpers and people watching fake news Fox News that think this is good, right? This is, when they have Joe Biden, when they rolled Joe Biden out and everybody could see the guy was senile, and then, the other news, CNN and MSNBC and all these people were pretending he wasn't, people can see through it. And if you're a person who's supposed to be doing a job where you're sitting on this cabinet meeting with Trump, and you're in charge of, what is she in charge of, national security stuff or whatever it is, Homeland Security. She's Homeland Security. It's not that she wears all these costumes.
Here she was a couple of weeks ago, posing Abu Ghraib style.
Look at this, in front of these guys. Jesus Christ. These criminals that are this mega prison in fucking wherever it is, El Salvador, wherever it is.
In front of prisoners at El Salvador's brutal mega prison, where the Trump administration has locked up hundreds of people who were living in the United States. And now the
why does she have this assault?
New chapter from Kristi Noem is here she is doing armed ride-alongs with ICE agents, where she gets dressed up and she holds big guns and she play acts at helping personally to arrest people as the Secretary of Homeland.
How bad is this? She wrote that bogus book where she talked about putting her dog down, which fucking torpedoed any chance she had of becoming vice president. And he still gave her a position. And she's out there and you're trying to tell me that Trump's assassination was real? This is political theater bullshit, right? Trump's into this kind of stuff. He probably likes her dressing up in these costumes.
And security. Again, comes with a hat. Our friend.
So then she gets to make fun of people. That's where we're at, right? So they're doing these performative. This is like the boardroom. It's this is Apprentice 101 or whatever it is, Apprentice 2.0, where he's sitting here at the boardroom and the people are going around telling him how great he's doing and how great they're doing, which is they're doing great because he's the president.
Those individuals that are here illegally, if they haven't registered, then they can be charged criminally, and they can face fines up to $1,000 a day and face deportation.
How do they fucking have that money?
If they don't go home, and they'll never get the chance to come back to America.
Where are you going to find them? Where's their money coming from?
So
we're going to fine them $1,000 a day if they don't leave our country?
Encouraging people to use the CBP Home app to register, and we're working on the resources and funding to buy them a plane ticket to send them home. I went to El Salvador.
Buy them a plane ticket and go to El Salvador. Oh, here she's talking about that.
Colombia and Mexico, and those countries and others are thinking about setting up programs to support these individuals when they get back to their countries. So when they get there, they'll have housing and food assistance. And so
sure they will. Fucking, what are you talking about?
Making sure that these folks have the opportunity to go home so that they can get the chance to come back to America is important. And
so it's a very big self-deport operation that we're starting.
Self-deporting? Why would anybody self-deport?
People have already self-deported. Well, we're just going to, when you have 21 million people that need to go home.
How many people did it? Like, let's go back here.
Housing and food assistance, and so making sure that these folks have the opportunity to go home so that they can get the chance to come back to America is important. And
So it's a very big self-deport operation that we're starting.
thousands of people have already.
Yeah.
Thousands of people. Why wouldn't you have you don't have the number, you don't have the exact number, thousands of people have self-deported, right? But you got millions to go, 21 million, and you got thousands, like 2,000. You know, how many people are self-deporting? Seems counterproductive.
Want anybody to get delayed and not.
Let's move on to the next dope over here.
We're going to be working with you very carefully on that. So a farmer will come in with a letter concerning certain people saying they're great, they're working hard. We're going to...
Okay, is this some bullshit thing? Someone else talking here.
To you and to your advisors about how to have reciprocal trade, how to have fair trade. Would have happened without you.
Wouldn't happen without you. Thanks, you're your best, Trump.
Great job. Lovely lot.
Well, thanks to your fantastic leadership, this amazing.
Thanks. This is where they should call this licking Trump's balls. This is no longer a cabinet meeting. It's a licking Trump's balls meeting.
Cabinet and the very talented Doge team. I'm excited to announce that we anticipate savings in FY26 from reduction of waste and fraud by $150 billion.
Does he has an actual seat here? Let me see. Let's see if I can find another budget one here that shows the people. So NBC has, this is Christine.
You got 21 million people that need to go home because they're here breaking our laws, then we need to facilitate that. And I've been working with the governors a lot lately on several different issues. One of them has been on FEMA for
in human history, the largest. So you declared an emergency, you took action.
You say the largest in history, right?
In history.
There's never been anything...
See, why not have two cameras, Fox? Fox, you suck.
Like what he left us. He left us a mess. His whole...
Who did? Who left us a mess? I missed that one. Okay, here's Elon.
And that we're going to be spending their tax dollars.
They give Elon a seat at the fucking table. He used to have to stand.
In a way that is sensible and fair and good.
And your people are fantastic. In fact, hopefully they'll stay around for the long haul. We'd like to keep as many as we can. They're great, smart, sharp, right? Finding things that no...
Right, they're the best people. Trump hires the best people. That's what Trump does. Trump is the best hirer of people. They're Trump people, and I hire good people. I mean, Trump hires good people.
Who would have thought of? Very computer savvy.
Yes.
Look, why they're doing this, they're talking... the MSC is showing the stock market plummeting.
We're working with hard to get the Trump Gold Card operational, hopefully in the next week or so.
What the hell was that? Trump gold card? Gold card. What the fuck is a Trump gold card? We have to look that up next time I take a break.
That'll be very exciting.
That'll be very exciting. Trump gold card. The governmental Trump gold card.
Really exciting. That's a pathway to citizenship into the United States. It's
a big deal.
Yep, it's a big deal. Thank you very much. Great job you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to your leadership and setting the mandate of transparency and accountability across the U.S. government, I'm bringing that transparency and accountability to the intelligence community, first and foremost, to make sure that you and your cabinet have that real-time, relevant, apolitical, objective intelligence to best inform.
So that you guys can leak it to fucking random liberal reporters who may or may not work for Mossad.
Whether it's negotiations for peace, negotiations around tariffs, the great work that you are leading around the cabinet today. Secondly, working with Department of Homeland Security and the FBI to and are seen before. We'll have those ready to release here within the next few days.
Well, that's the Kennedy thing. Here, let's go back. 2240.
The paper around RFK, Senator Robert F. Kennedy's assassination, as well as Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, these have been sitting in boxes in storage for decades. They have never been scanned or seen before. We'll have those ready to release here within the next few days.
That's great. Bobby, how do you feel about that?
Hey, Bobby, how do you feel about that? Your dad got killed. Let's bring that back up and release all the paperwork. How do you feel about it, Bobby?
I'm
very gratified to you.
That's
Very
hitting close to
gratified,
home,
sir.
isn't it,
Yeah,
huh?
no
When you
kidding.
think,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Bobby when that statement's made.
I'm very grateful to you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, let's take your time and lick his balls there, Bobby.
And you'll let Bobby see some of this because, it's very personal stuff.
Let's let Bobby see some of it. Bob, you get to see some of it. Not all of it, but some of it.
But it's time.
I've asked him, and his response is, put it out. The world needs to know the truth.
And his uncle that's been out, and anything that hasn't been out, they can go to your offices and see, right?
Everything that we have within our possession, it's either online or it's physically at the National Archives and Records Agency. We also have hunters going out, Mr. President, and looking in the storage lockers at FBI and CIA and other agencies, specifically to find if there
Look, it's Benjamin Franklin looking overhead.
if there is
Okay,
anything
so
else that has.
Okay, you guys, that's what's all bullshit. Here we go to Kennedy.
Exposure to fluoride and IQ loss, particularly in children. Lee and I were in Utah this week, to announce that Utah became the first state in the country to ban supplemental fluoride. I'm working with Brooke.
Boom. That's good news.
And governors now in 24 states who are advancing MAHA legislation to get soda pops off of the food stamp program, off the SNAP program.
So these are good things, so I'm not going to shit on that, but we'll see what happens with him. I see the Marco Rubio thing where he does the...
In the last year, as part of this AA arms race.
Other countries that are now coming here and wanting to join something that actually makes it's crazy to allow these. I mean, basically, we lived in a world where Chinese companies can do whatever they want in America, but our companies cannot do anything over there unless they allow it, and even then, they steal our stuff.
But they're great firms. They're the best firms.
He shits on China. He does the Stomach Talk. He does the Gator thing. So, they went around the fucking table and everyone licked Trump's balls and told how great they're doing for the American people. Because this is the kind of shit Trump does. Let me see if I can find the Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio starts off here.
One of the most important things I believe you'll achieve in your presidency is reordering the world in a proper way. For 31 years, more than 31 years now, multiple administrations have allowed the Chinese to deindustrialize this country, to take away jobs and factories.
Okay, so he shits on China here, and then he ends up here.
In the United States, University of Florida, is also now the national champions in basketball, and we hope you'll host them here soon, Mr. President. Go Gators!
They're coming. They're coming. They're coming, guys.
That was so sad. He did the gator chop thing, whatever they do. They pretend that their arms are the gator's mouth. And so, that was like pathetic. And so, little Marco, remember when he was talking about Trump in a debate? Let's see if I can find that. So it starts off here. Trump's definitely has lost some weight.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
It's right here. Let's go back a little bit.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen, gentlemen.
You ought to show up.
Gentlemen, you got to do better than this.
This guy has the number one.
Mr. Trump, may I ask you,
absentee record in the United
I'd like to ask.
Boom. Don't worry about little Marco. Little fucking Marco. Marco, you little fuck. So there was a time when the Indiana Pacers, they had a player, forget his name, and it's not important. You need to tell me. Don't care. Don't need to know. I could look it up. But they were playing the New York Knicks, and guy lost his playbook, and it talked about things that you would say to other players. Like there was a player for the New York Knicks called John Starks, and you were supposed to talk about his sister. When you're talking shit to him, you're supposed to say shit about his sister. It said this in this playbook. And the guy Don Imus, got a hold of it. And the guy called up and said, I should play for St. John's, which is a New York university. And, just give me a break. I'm already fucking getting in trouble for losing my playbook. And Don Imus said, fuck you, I'm going to read it anyway. But, they have these playbooks of things to say in these debates, right? And one of the playbook for Trump is he doesn't like it, the people talking about his little hands. And so Marco Rubio.
He's always calling me Little Marco. And I'll admit, the guy, he's taller than me. He's like 6'2", which is why I don't understand why his hands are the size of someone who's 5'2". Have you seen his hands? They're like this. And you know what they say about men with small hands?
Boom.
You can't trust them.
He said I had small hands. Actually, I'm 6'3", not 6'2", but he said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
Yeah, you definitely do because people said it.
I've always had people say, Donald, you have the most beautiful hands. Right?
That's what they say about me. And they say that I got big hands. And so this is where we are. These are your fucking leaders here. So they already have a card out there, or a program where you could buy citizenship. So rich people have a pathway to citizenship. And Trump has now this.
Trump opening up a financial pathway to citizenship with a gold card visa. Not a Visa credit card, but a visa in the immigration sense. Asking price, $5 million.
Why does this remind me of Charlie and the Chocolate
So
Factory?
you can pay $5,000. Wait, $5 million. What the hell am I talking about? And you can get a gold card pathway to citizenship. So Trump's allowing you to buy citizenship in America for $5 million. So if you got $5 million, then you're probably a billionaire. If you can spend $5 million to get a citizen in the United States, then you're fucking a billionaire, right? You're someone with hundreds of millions of dollars. That $5 million, of course, you're gonna have a whole family. So you get this gold card. They have another card already that's less expensive, but it's been making money for America, where rich people can come in and buy. It's just all this stuff, right? They want the rich people, not poor people. All these things. Okay, so I just want to say this. I'm not a doomsday prepper or a doomsday fucking person, right? I find the Apocalaughs funny, things breaking down funny, dysfunctional things when they start to implode, families, relationships, teams, businesses. It makes me like you were just talking about. It makes me laugh, but I don't. Like, I'm not an end of the world type person. Like, not really. Like, there's some of that in me. But what I am is that when I grew up in this country, when I grew up in America, I knew this system was fucked. Like, I knew it was something messed up with the system. And I should say this more often. Like, everyone has their way of going about this. And so, some of the things I have, being introverted, being dyslexic, being from the family I was from, just my personality, truther stuff always appealed to me. When I was like, I don't know, sometime between I was probably 10 years old, I was 4th or 5th grade, I had to do a report. And I went to the library, and I used to go to the library all the time and read about my favorite animals. Like I had a 12th grade reading level when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. Because I'd read these encyclopedias and things like this. I'd look up my favorite animal. We had a set of encyclopedias at home. And I'd go to the library and I'd find all these books. And I'd read them about animals. And I also read, other types of books, like fictional books. I read it quite a bit when I was young. So I had to do a report. And I found this, I don't know, it must have been on the Civil War. I don't know if it was just any type of topic, but I ended up picking this thing. And it was a book that said that the Civil War was an economic war. And it went into great detail. And I don't know what my teacher thought. I don't remember, but I wrote a paper on this, right? It was my first truther thing, that the official story was bullshit. And I found shit like that all the time, like unintentionally. Like I just found this random book, and I started reading it. It said the Civil War wasn't about slavery at all. It was about economics, and it went into the details. And I could understand it, like, and I was like, well, that's kind of true, right? Based on what the book was saying. And I submitted a report on it. It was like my first truther thing. There's people, the end of the world, the sky's falling people, end of the world people, truther people, conspiracy theorists. There's all these types of people in every society, even good ones. There's people that don't fit in, or are on the outside, or don't really like the system, or they just know there's something off about it. And, there's a wide range of us. And when things are going great, like in the 70s and 80s, 90s, people like us are fringe people, right? The only time that we're in vogue, the only time that we're, where the rest of the people are like, oh, wow, that guy really has something to say, is when shit starts really collapsing. Like when it is the end of the world, right? Like you can say it's the end of the world through centuries and, whatever that means, because there are civilizations that have collapsed. There are countries that have had economic collapse, or, they've fallen apart. I mean, this country's right now in chaos. They change leaders like some professional teams change coaches. Every 3 or 4 years, they get a new leader, and the people are really upset, are rioting and shit like that, right? So, all those things are part of it. But the only time that we have some value, all of us who just don't fit in with the current system, is when the current system sucks and is collapsing. Up at the point it collapses, we're, especially the closer it gets to it, the more the system pushes back against us, right? Until like there's, a real collapse, and then they're saying what we've been saying for years, except they still consider us crazy. That's what's happened with the truthers, right? The truthers, real truthers, not these fake right-wing ones and not all the goofy ones, but real truthers that are, who are, use critical thinking skills and have a, reasonable grasp of what's going on and find real shit. And there are less and less of us who are like that, right? And we don't all have to be the same. We just have a little bit higher standards and a little bit better critical thinking skills than the people who just throw shit up against the wall and, right-wing Trumpers that, are still not confronting their own bullshit, right? But either way, I grew up in this system and I knew something was wrong with it. Like I articulate it, or I couldn't, be able to like see it clearly as a kid. Just these things I would see that made me believe that the system was fucked up. Like just watching things and the way people were acting, and, knowing it's just not sustainable, and all these things I knew for my whole life. Like this can't go on. And then as I found out more about it, that belief was confirmed. The more I understood about the system, the more I understood about people. I started to, I started taking psychology classes and work as a counselor, and I pushed past the veneer, the beautiful buildings and the glamour and the glitz and the USA bullshit. And you start seeing some of the crazy shit that people do. Like fucking, I mean, it's like sick shit that people do. And that the system is really fucked, right? When you go to the underbelly and you see the part that, America doesn't want you to see, as well as the steady decline. Like as you get older and things get worse, like people are either getting better or they're getting worse. And there's times where people were like, oh my God, you guys are so much better than we were, generations of people. Because kids were getting educated and, there was some level of, parents realizing, oh, their kids had surpassed them. There was a point where that stopped happening. And, it started happening before I was born, where each generation got worse, right? I mean, you can say that the hippies did some good stuff, and they saw things and they pushed for change that was necessary, like the good part of the hippie movement. And so through the 60s and 70s, but then you get in the 90s and the kids born in the 80s, 90s, these generations, and then certainly now with the kids growing up with computers, they are better with technology. Like if you need a kid to explain you, how to work fucking an app or something, yeah, sure, they're great at that shit. But everything else they suck at, and they don't even know. They have no idea what it was like to live a real life world without the internet. Like they can't conceive of life without the internet and devices and screens. And so, there's been a steady decline over a period of time where we've gotten softer and weaker, less of our abilities and things, maybe smarter, more educated and sophisticated in some ways, but not better, and not morally better, and disconnected from nature and God, and the breakdown of the American family, the world family, divorce, all these things, right? And so even without divorce, families are just not as good and not the same. Spending less time together, and then just all of it, the overall decline, and we've witnessed this, and so now we see it coming. And for me, like I knew there was something wrong, and I knew there was something missing, and I found that for me, the Sajmark system and the meditation connecting to divinity within, and there was teachings that coincided with my own experience, and that there needed to be a planned breakdown of our system, because as long as the system exists, people will not go in the right direction. And I fully 100% believe in that and see it all the time. So that this Apocalaughs isn't something that, it's of our own making. It's our own going against the divine will. But also there's divine forces working for something better. And this system has to be taken down for something better to take its place. And that's in that's a big part of the teachings. Well, not a big part, but it's a part of the teachings of the Sizemore system and these whispers, prophecies. And, I'm fully behind that and believe it. But, I at this point in my life, it's harder and harder to change. Changing internally is the hardest thing. And by meditating, it becomes easier. But changing your habits and your physical things it's almost impossible as you get older. Like you need certain things just to survive. And, not having those things is totally destabilizing and, almost life ending. Where like if you have to give up certain things, certain levels of comfort and support and things that, your routine, like you get more and more routine oriented as you get older, and then have to adapt to something like this catastrophic. And, I farmed before, so it isn't going to be all that hard. I mean, it's not going to be, it's going to be hard. I shouldn't say that, but not maybe as hard for someone like me. But, it isn't like I don't want to toil, and I mean, the level of what our lifestyle now, in contrast to what it's going to be, it's going to be dramatic. And it's happening right in front of our eyes. And, people not preparing for it have no chance at all. Like mentally accepting that, first of all, you got to accept that it happens. And then, that's a big deal. Being accepting of this is our reality. And most people be in denial, thinking that it's going to come back around. Like that'll be the hope. In the beginning, in 6 months it'll be rebooted, a year it'll be better. But when people finally accept, this is it, it's over, then it's going to be there's mass die-off. People just give up one way or another because that's just the way it's going to be. And, for them, that's all they can do. And so, we'll see how this all plays out over time. But like I said, I'm into it in like weird ways. I think it's funny. I've lived through this kind of thing before in previous existences and, whatever capacity. So I'm aware of it. It's not like something new for me. But, I recognize the difficulty of the habits and all the things we have to give up or just taken away and then having to deal with that. And, it's each person's ability to do that. The connection to divinity is the, key thing. Without it, you can't do shit. You can't go through this kind of change. Like you have to have God to help you make sense of it. So it's for each person to figure out what they're going to do. Because lots of people, they're marked for extinction. They have no shot. They're not, so for them, they're not concerned about it because they know that, when this thing goes down, it's like every moment until it goes down, everything's the same, right? There's small changes. There's whispers. There's little, nervousnesses and little news stories about the impending collapse. But until that moment when it hits, like there's going to be a defining moment, maybe, a series of them where it's just like, oh my God, there'll be a few of them and like, well, we can shake that one off. Like 9/11, we can shake that one off. The economic collapse in 2008, oh, okay, we can shake that one off. The COVID thing, we can shake that one off. But there'll be like things that happen, they'll be more severe. And then you'll be like, well, could be the end. And then you're like, all right, we're able to stave off that one, but then there'll be another one and another one. And then before you know it, you'll be like, all right, we're fucked. Like there'll be this point where people realize that this is over. And then what are you going to do? And then that becomes the choice. And the first part is connecting with God. And the second part is retooling your whole life and, changing your whole understanding of what life's about and starting to live in that way. And, when money and grocery stores and those things are no longer cars and things. I mean, it depends on what it is. Like, we don't know, there might be pockets of civilization and pockets of, chaos and, it'll be different places around the globe and the world or the country. You'll see like it's going to be, for each person to navigate their particular circumstances. And then there has to be a motivation to do it. What's your motivation? Like all your things, all your motivations are taken away from you. All the things that you gravitated to are gone. So then what do you live for? Like what's your purpose? Right? So that's where we're talking about all these things. Anyways, let me wrap this one up now. I should probably talk about these things. I'll probably put this one in the Journey series as well. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.